So, tell me how you decided to come work with your dad. Was that already?
It was just, we didn't even talk about it. Well, I guess he and I did somewhere, but he had a partner, Chester Peterson, here, and I came when I passed the bar and was eligible to practice, received my license, and I came here and moved in as the little new kid on the block, and I always thought, not in criticism of my father, but that part of the problem I faced, that I was still his little boy, and that without him being aware of it, he still treated me like that a little bit. And I don't say that in any way to criticize him. It's just one of the things that I think was happening, and I didn't know how to. I tried to talk to him about it a time or two, and I don't think he understood what I was saying even. And I would go to the office late, and I'd come home early, and we bought a calf and raised it, and I'd grown up working on a farm, and I still was interested in it, and so I went to my dad and said, "Dad, I don't enjoy what I'm doing. I think I would rather not be an attorney." And he immediately, he said, if that's what you want, that's fine. He said, "You make that decision, I'll support you completely." He said, "What do you want to," I told him I was thinking about trying to acquire to rent some farmland here or something. He said, "Let me put up some money and I'll make a down payment on some farmland down in the Mesa area." And at that time you could buy farmland down there for $400 or $500 an acre. And no, that's what we did. We bought 160 acres out east and a little bit south of Gilbert along the railroad track out there. And Grandpa Carpenter bought me not new, but a very good John Deere A. I don't know if you remember anything about that, but the A was a G was their bigger tractor, and an A was the next size smaller than that. And he bought a tractor and simply gave it to me. And your Uncle Gerald Carpenter and Gerald was very, very helpful. He was already down there and farming, and he was very, very helpful to me. We farmed together for for 2 or 3 years down there. And
you say you farmed together. What kinds?
Well, we would plow together and etc. And he loaned me machinery, stuff like that. And but the most important thing that happened, we immediately were caught up in the Gilbert ward. It was full of young people like us, and there were I don't know how many couples that we immediately fit in, and we're just having a great time. Didn't have any children yet, and then my brother Ed, one time when we had about 6 children, he and I were together somewhere, and he said, "I don't know if you know what I'm talking about." He said, "I'd be glad to perform a vasectomy for you if you want to." And I said, "What in the world is that?" So he explained, and you know what that means, yeah. I presume. Anyway, he thought we were crazy to have that many children because he'd only had 4 or 5. and it was just a great time, Jordan. We rented land around everywhere I could find any to rent. I would do it. Nothing scared me.
Did you hire people to work with you, or?
Yeah. I had one full-time man, and we hired others as we needed them. But I don't remember all the details now, other than what I've already told you earlier. And And then we had one of the couples there was a guy named Joe Lamb. He was a little older than me, but he came to me once and says, "I've got a chance to buy this cattle ranch up north of Phoenix. It's too big for me. Are any of your family interested in it?" So I looked into it with him, and talked to my dad and my brother Addison, and we formed what's called a 1120S corporation, where you file your tax returns as a corporation, but you have all the benefits as if you were doing it. I don't remember all the tax reasons why we did that, but that's what we operated as. And some called it a sub-S corporation, some called it 1120S, and we bought this big cattle ranch up north of Phoenix there in the Bradshaw, southern end of the Bradshaw Mountains. And I didn't know I'd never been in the cattle business, but I figured I'm as smart as the next man. I can make this work. And we borrowed a whole bunch of money, and I was the manager. And we had wild cattle, and I was able to find guys who knew how and who were able to work for me. And the most fascinating thing about that cattle operation up there is that in those days you could borrow money and the interest rate was low enough. I can't remember what it was, but if you were producing anything, you could gradually pay it off. And so that's what we did. We got it completely paid off. And a guy came along and offered to trade that for a cattle ranch over here in Clifton-Morenci area. And I can't remember why we did that, but I did.
That's because?
Oh yeah, it's because it was so close to town, and so many people were coming up there and driving their four-wheel drive pickups up the roads that we had. And it was a little bit unnerving from a financial standpoint. But and early on, I don't know how come I happened to stop at this tractor place. I had a TD-14 International crawler. It was quite a bit smaller than that yellow one I eventually ended up with. And I realized I needed something bigger. And as I was there once, I think I was buying a part or whatever, I noticed this big yellow TD-20, which is twice as big as the one I had. And it was priced at $9,000 or $10,000 or something, and it was on what was called a Dutch auction. Every week or month, whatever it was, it decreased in price by 10%. And I looked it over, and they started the motor for me, and it was a good tractor. And the motor was a big 6-cylinder, long, slow operating. You could almost hear the pistons going up and down. It was so slow. So I made up my mind, when it gets down to $3,500, I'm going to buy that if it's still there. It was not a popular crawler because it was not hydraulic. The running of the blade out in front was a cable. And there was a big winch thing on the back where the cable wrapped up, and a big handle out here where it moved about this far. and so when I would stop by there every week. When it got to $3,500, they had moved it to the back of the lot. It was too cheap. They didn't want to sell it, and they'd hope nobody. And so I said, "You still got that, whatever the number was?" And they said, "Yeah." I said, "I want to buy that." They proceeded to tell me why it wasn't a good crawler, and I said, I'm aware of all that, but I want to buy it anyway. So I hired somebody to haul it out there for me, and taught myself how to drive a bulldozer. And I owned that thing for a long time. I don't know how many miles of road I built and how many big dirt tanks that I built. Some of them were lifesavers. They put water where there wasn't any, and etc. And I counted it up at one time. I think I had built a total of 35 of those dirt tanks. You and I worked on some of them over there.
Yep.
After that flooding period. Anyway, that's the cattle business.
How did you decide to go from farming to ranching?
I don't remember why I did that.
Because we thought we were not making any money on the farm. The interest we had to pay on the money we borrowed to run didn't leave us anything left over.
I think, in direct answer to your question, I was looking for something new. That's the way I'm made. But there's one thing I never ever look for anything new. That was a wife. I didn't want anything new. I was tickled to death with what I had, and we had a great time growing up and raising all you children.
Tell me about, do you have any specific memories of the farm in Gilbert that stand out for you? Working on the farm?
I don't think so. Not that I don't remember.
How about the ranch north of Phoenix?
Lots of memories from up there. Lots of memories. Right now I can't put any of them into words. I was thoroughly caught up with the reclamation stuff I was doing with that bulldozer, and we built a big working corral up to Tip Top, and I would haul the lumber up there, and they'd hired an old boy who knew how to. He would. You couldn't dig post hole where we made this corral. It was too rocky. And so he said, I know how to do that. He said, you get me the dynamite. Those days I could buy dynamite and caps. There was a place in Phoenix where I just stop and buy a box of dynamite, and I taught myself how to do that. You can't do that anymore. They won't sell it to anybody except to certified something or other. Anyway, when he would, this guy would, I've forgotten what, they had a little drill that was sharp on the end. A single point. And he'd pound with a medium-sized hammer, he'd pound that in the ground and then hit it back and forth till it came loose, until he made a hole a little bit bigger than the stick of dynamite. And it would be down about that deep.
About a foot?
About a foot and a half deep. Then he'd put a quarter of a stick of dynamite in there and put the fuse in it. And he would light the fuse. Then he'd run over, he would yell, "Fire in the hole." And I would stand there and watch him, and pretty soon the thing would go off and it'd just go whoop. The dirt would move a little bit. It didn't blow up. It just went like that. And he'd come dig it out, and there'd be a perfect hole. And there was an old cat. Came down from off the mountain somewhere, a house cat, big one. He appropriately was named Tom after he'd been there a little while. And this was a rather gruesome thing, but I didn't know what else to do about it. There was in the back of the house at Tip Top, there was a there was I've forgotten what you call it. Anyway, a mother rabbit had 5 or 6 little rabbits in her nest back under some brush there. And old Tom discovered that, and each day he'd go have one of those rabbits for breakfast. And it was very painful to me to know what he was doing, but I decided I better not interfere with the process of nature, so I quit looking. One other thing I remembered, Boulder Creek drained lots of country. And the road when we drove from the NO headquarters down on the Alfrea River up to Tip Top, which is the center of where we were working, we crossed Boulder Creek. Going up, we crossed it 13 times. Coming back, we only crossed it 12 or something. I don't remember. Anyway, when it was running big enough, if you drove with your regular motor, the water would be deep enough, the fan would throw water all over the motor and it would drown out. So I discovered the secret of that on my own. I didn't ask anybody. I just said, I know what I've got to go up there. So I'd loosen the fan belt and tip the generator over so that the fan was no longer turning. And then when I'd get up to the top or down to the bottom, when I made the last crossing, then I would just stop and tighten that up again and go on. But oftentimes the water would be over this deep. And you go through
3 or 4 feet?
Yeah, real slow, so you didn't get water in the crankcase. But and I remember down the river, half a mile or so from our big NO headquarters there, there was a flat top mesa that had Indian ruins on top of it. You could see where they had. There was one narrow little place where you could get up on top. All the rest of it was a straight drop off. And anyway, we took the family out there one time. And as we drove up to this place where the little trail went up on there, and there were already some people up there. And 2 of the girls, I can't remember who they were. Maybe it was Elaine and Tom White was living with us then. And anyway, they were holding Tom's hand up this kind of a steep trail. And they looked up on top, and there was already somebody else up there, and he came over to the edge and looked over. And they both were frightened. They said to Tom, "What if they're real Indians up there?" And Tom laughed. Oh dear, and we hit a rock, knocked a hole in the transmission of the old Ford car we were driving, and so I took the pan off, walked back down to the NO, pounded it flat, used some baling wire and a cutting torch, and welded that hole shut with baling wire and a cutting torch, and there was some transmission fluid there, so we got the car repaired and went on. I don't think I ever did take that off again. It was working. Why worry about it?
You're talking about when you used the baling wire to fix the oil pan?
Yeah.
That was up at this ranch.
Wherever it was, it happened.
Why was the headquarters called the NO?
That was just a brand.
Well, that was the brand.
One of the brands we got, and so people called it that. One day my dad was up there with me, and there was an old hound dog sitting in the place by the NO, and their eyes droop and their ears fall down and they look sad, and one of them was sitting there with his eyes drooping, and Elaine went up to him and put her arms around him and said, "Don't cry, doggy, I's here." I thought my dad never would stop laughing at that. And I went to my Uncle Dave Lee, and I said, before we went up there, before we bought into it, and I said, Uncle Dave, I need some advice. We got this chance to buy this cattle ranch up there. It's going to take a lot of money, and I guess I'll be in charge of it. And I don't know anything about the cattle business. And he said, well, can you find somebody to do the work for you? And I said, well, I guess that's what I'm risking. He said, then the only advice I have to give you is this. He said, don't jeopardize what you've already acquired down there, and go ahead and try it. That was it. So I did exactly that.
How often would you go up there, and how long would you stay typically?
I went nearly every week, and I would stay till Friday about noon. I would start back home, but I'd go Monday morning.
And how long was the drive?
An hour and a half, something like that. And I remember we had a neighbor across the freeway, old John Klein. He had a bigger ranch than mine, but he and I, we had enough communication. We knew each other and we were sort of friends, but although we didn't have any occasion. Anyway, one time I saw him somewhere, and I said, John, I don't know how come you're living right, but every time I look up, it's raining on your ranch. And he looked so startled, and he said, he said, I've said that same thing to me. Udall must be a good Mormon or something. Every time I look up, it's raining over on his side of the freeway. Those were good days.
What did you enjoy most about those days?
The repairing things, fixing the fences, working on springs, building roads, etc. Dirt tanks. It was not work. It was pure enjoyment for me. I almost felt like it was immoral. It was so good. One of the things that I did over a period of years, I was startled about when we moved over here in '76. I had bought this farmland. My dad loaned me $25,000. I was telling him about this old Kempton farm up here, and he said, why don't you buy it? And I said, well, I don't have the money to make the down payment. He said, let me loan you the money, and then you can pay me back whenever you want to. So he put up the $25,000, and for the first couple of years, we rented it to Angel Escobedo, who was a very safe, sound farmer. And then I realized I was going to have to do it myself, and that's when we moved over here. Before then, I just had the farmland rented out, and I rigged up a homemade grader, and we realized we had to get some better ditches than what we had, and I had a chance to buy a plow and a boat, the cement boat, from there's a Hunter ditch lining down there. I knew the guy who owned it, and I went and talked to him. He sold those two things to me for $1,000, and so I bought them. I said, I'll figure out some way to make this work, and I still had this old TD-20, and I built a big boom on the back so I could pick things up with it. It had two drums on the back. One of them ran the bulldozer, and the other one whatever else you wanted. And so I poured ditches for myself. I taught myself how to use a transit and how to make them level. And I started doing that, and I poured ditches all over the country up here. And I got caught up in that like everything else I had done. I enjoyed doing it. And we would I would get 2 or 3 guys standing on the base of the plow, and we would plow the ditch out exactly at the right, size. And then we'd pick the boat up with the thing on the back and maneuver it around and set it down inside the ditch. And then I had a big chain. It was 3/4 inch links. Otherwise, it would have pulled the chain in two when I was pulling the cement truck. And I would tie the boat to the corner of the dozer blade, have it up above where it would reach out over the ditch just a little bit, enough to work. Anyway, we would go along, and I got to where I could just look inside the thing and see whether the cement was wet enough. The theory I used to use it when you put it in the boat and pull it just a little ways, it needs to look like a fat woman's leg. And that's the best way I could describe it. Just slightly wrinkled. She never did like that definition. But we would, when each truck came, I'd get up and look in and say, "Now, give me 10 more gallons of water," or whatever. And away we'd go. and we poured lots of dishes up here. The boat and the plow were fixed so you could go as little as a 24-inch ditch, which means from the bottom up to the edge of the top of the thing is 24 inches deep. Now, a 30-inch ditch is much wider and much bigger, and we had to be very careful with those. The dozer wasn't quite wide enough, and I'd have to really watch carefully as I was driving the last pass to clean out the last bit of the dirt and make that ditch perfect. And I would really watch closely because half of each track was over the ditch. But I thoroughly enjoyed that. You've gathered by now, I was a risk taker, and I loved to do it. But there was never any risk with your mother. She was a gem. One of these days I'll tell you about her when I can do it without crying. But let me digress for a minute. When I was a student at the university and she came down there to go to school, she was an art major. And I saw her across the campus one day, and I was trotting to catch up with her, and she was out in front of me. She was wearing a letter sweater from Thatcher High School. It was green, and her hair was, I can't remember what color it was, but very beautiful and hanging down over that sweater. And as I was running to catch up with her, I thought to myself, that's the most beautiful girl I have ever known, and ever will know. And I better not let her get away. And from that point forward, I knew that I wanted to marry her, and we proceeded from there. And she agreed with me. Not that she was the most beautiful girl, but that we ought to get married, and so we worked toward that. But that was I'd thought about that a lot and was going in that direction. But that one experience of watching her walk away from me, not knowing I was coming, was a very telling time for me. And I've never, ever been sorry, not 1 second. The kind of the culminating part of our life is when we had this law office here. For the last 4 or 5 years that we did that, she was my secretary, and we got along so well and had a great time and helped people and didn't worry about things, and it was very, very good, etc. I remember, I don't know why I'm going to tell you this next, but there is a legal expression called ad infinitum, means to infinity. And one of the professors explained to us, he said there's a poem you can remember that helps you know what that term, that Latin expression ad infinitum means. He said, here's the poem. All dogs had little fleas upon their backs to bite them. Those fleas in turn have other fleas, and so on ad infinitum. and so here we are. We're both in our upper years, and I'll be 83 in a month and a half or whatever, and she's coming up on 80, and she's been a joy, Jordan. And we had church experiences that were unbelievable. When we went on a mission, when we served in the temple, when I was a regional representative, when I was a stake patriarch. She was part of all of those, especially the stake patriarch. She did all the typing. And after a while, at the beginning, we had several other women who were helping. But she is a jewel. And we've said to each other over and over, why us? How come we've been so blessed to have 8 good children, have them all be good, honorable people and members of the church in good standing, and so on. And oftentimes it seems too good to be true, but it is, and we'll take it. So, I have now rambled on at great length. Well, I don't remember what your last question was, but let's start over again.
That's all good stuff. So, back on the ranch in Phoenix, do you have maps of the ranch where you can show here's where Tip Top is and here's the headquarters?
I don't think I do have. I can get a map at the BLM office up here. They will have I've forgotten what they call them, but they have.
We should do that. I think it would be a nice to have a map in the book to show the locations of the places they're talking about.
What'd you say?
He probably wants a drawn map on a piece of paper that shows the name of the places and the
No, I'd like a real map.
I can get one.
Okay.
It cost $1.95 or
right.
something.
We'll flip a coin to see who pays for the map.
Yeah, I could get one of those.
the map is
All right.
huge.
Well, I think we're on to the next section, so let me pause this and put a new tape in.